Something I thought I should probably mention is this review is uh, meant for people who've already seen the film, so there will be spoilers. But I'm not just saying that to avoid spoilers, I'm saying it because there isn't much footage I could get for visual aid of what I'm talking about. So these videos are for people who've already seen the film to discuss it. But if you could just go into this video not caring about spoilers, and maybe you'll still be able to enjoy it. Who knows? But yeah, I thought I'd just have that disclaimer. Anyway, enjoy.
Hello everyone, I just saw Godzilla King of the Monsters. I was actually a fan of the first 2014 Godzilla, despite its flaws. The main complaints of that being that he wasn't on screen much, and the abundance of characters that honestly seemed paper thin. That being said, to me the first Godzilla had the quality over quantity approach, as every single scene featuring Godzilla was shot, choreographed and framed so viscerally and creatively, with awesome sound design supporting it. I don't know what it is about that deep bass sound effect whenever Godzilla rises and stands, but every time I hear it, it just sends a chill down my spine. Not only that, but the sound packs so much of a punch that it's what made me realise I needed a soundbar for my TV, because the speakers sounded like they were about to burst. You know what I'm talking about, that humming sound. Also, there's so much imagery that I just fucking love. And if you don't like it, then no offense,
but you have boring taste and I don't want to be friends with you.
Plus, in the 2014 Godzilla, the whole premise is Godzilla coming out of hiding after being dormant for thousands of years. As we, as the audience, are put in the shoes of the humans, seeing Godzilla for the first time in the 21st century. You know what, fuck it, this is just going to be a review of 2014 Godzilla and Godzilla King of the Monsters. My thoughts on the first Godzilla are going to preface my insights on its sequel, so I need to break down why Godzilla worked as a film it was trying to be, because I can't really say the same for King of the Monsters. I'm just going to refer to the first film as Godzilla, and the sequel is King of Monsters, so I'm not saying Godzilla so much, it drives me crazy. So, in Godzilla, Godzilla himself is still the driving force of the plot, so say what you want about his absence and lack of runtime in the film, but to say they shouldn't have called the film Godzilla because he is barely on screen is nonsense. I know some people are saying it jokingly, but I prefer it when jokes make sense. Godzilla is the reason shit happens in the film. Without him, the film wouldn't go on very long, as the Mutos would just eradicate everyone. He is triggered by the emergence of other titans, and he awakens from being dormant. A title of a story doesn't have to abide by such basic simplistic standards of the subject having to occupy the vast majority of screen time to have the film named after it. If the film's plot, theme, world, stakes or conflict revolves around Godzilla, then the film's going to be called Godzilla. I don't hear people complaining when the Halo ring is nowhere to be found in the games, animations and novels set in the extended Halo universe, because the story is always about the Halo rings in the grand scheme of things. In Vikings, no one complains about all the scenes set in England because the British history is a retelling and it's heavily influenced by the Vikings in Scandinavia. It Comes at Night is about the things that come at night. It's about the domestic friction and conflict between two families who are forced to live in a desolate home. The creature that comes at night is almost never on screen, but nevertheless, the film is called It Comes at Night because the thing that comes at night is the reason the survivors are trapped in the house in the first place. It's the entire premise of the film. There was a lot of hate for Bird Box, but no one was whining that Bird Box didn't take up the whole film. The title of the film should just give you an idea of the premise. This mentality of thinking that titles should just be simply based on what is on screen is the reason we get boring, forgettable titles such as Lucy. Well, that's her name, so when she's on screen, because she's the main character, so let's just call it Lucy. If you call your film something that commonplace, your film is going to get lost in the noise of all the other films called Lucy. I mean, at least associate a different word with the main character of the film, such as Sophie's Choice, for example. If you still can't understand why Godzilla is titled Godzilla, then I don't know what to tell you. Sorry for that tangent, I just needed to say that. However, I absolutely understand and agree with the criticisms regarding the early death of Bryan Cranston. He was by far the most intriguing part of the film. After his wife dies on the mission that he sent her on, he feels guilt and
will do whatever it takes to find out the truth about the monsters. He had an outer motivation and inner motivation. His outer motivation was to prevent the creatures from destroying humanity due to his tampering with nature. His inner motivation was to do this so that his wife's death wasn't in vain and the mission he sent her on wasn't a waste. Everyone was fresh from the hype surrounding Breaking Bad, as it had just recently wrapped with the finale. So fans of Bryan Cranston were game to see what he does next and what his presence could bring to a mass budget film. He could have fought alongside Godzilla, with himself being the brains and Godzilla being the radioactive brawn. Godzilla's lack of motivations and reasoning, beyond him being the creatures destined to defend the world from rabid monsters, would have been alleviated as an issue. But unfortunately he's killed off, leaving us with a cliche human storyline about a man who's a soldier, his wife who's a nurse, and his children. It's the most basic, uninteresting and obvious motivation for a character to have. I suppose you could say that he's finishing what his father started, so his father's death wasn't in vain, but no, he isn't really, because he isn't even in the same level or field of expertise.
That's Ken Watanabe's character. Aaron Taylor Johnson's and Ken Watanabe's characters have shit all to do with each other. Any emotional gratification that they could have had for the remaining 1 hour and 20 minutes of the film is dumbed down to the generic nurse-wife plotline present in way too many of these Hollywood disaster movies. Ken Watanabe's character fills in the hole that Bryan Cranston left. I really like the scene where Godzilla is getting pinned down by the two Mutos.
So the soldier helps Godzilla by destroying the Muto's eggs, therefore distracting the Muto. Then just before the sun is about to be killed by the creature, Godzilla ignites his atomic breath and then blasts the Muto to oblivion. It's just fucking awesome. To be honest, I will admit that most of the elements I love in this film are superficial. As I mentioned before, the scenes with Godzilla has amazing CGI with great music, sound design and cinematography.
It allowed me and those like-minded to forgive the relative lack of Godzilla on the screen, because every time he was on the screen it was just amazing. I would much rather take that over the half-assed, jarring, mind-numbing alternative of quantity over quality, where in some cases you can't even see what the fuck's going on and you feel like the fight is going on for far too long. To an extent where even if the fight scenes are well shot and produced, I will still become desensitized to it because it all blurs into a clusterfuckery of punching, shooting, kicking. I promise you, if you were to ask me to enunciate exactly what happens in the monster fights in chronological detail in 2014 Godzilla, then I would be able to do so because it's just memorable. If you were to ask me to do the same for Pacific Rim Uprising, for example, I'd struggle. When Godzilla forces the Muto's jaw open and discharges his atomic breath down his throat, it just seems like that is just rises this film above mediocrity. It's not just Godzilla scenes either, it's almost the Muto scenes. Objectively, the script could have been reworked and moulded into something far more effective and impactful with some narrative to really grasp onto. The logic of the plot follows, and it explains the radioactivity of the creatures fairly well, but it could have been done in a less expositional way. Overall, Godzilla is a well-made visceral experience depicting great set pieces with stunning visuals and special effects work. The core of its issues is in its script. The film insists on going on a tangent with showing a dog on a beach, to putting the pace to a grinding halt for characters to explain things to the audience. Godzilla is chock full of PowerPoint presentation, video essays style scenes of how Godzilla came to be, why he's here, how old is he, how did he get his name, what do the legends say. Half of these just don't need answering in the first place, and the other half can be told in a much more naturally and succinct way. Overall, whilst 2014's Godzilla is logically sound, coherent and consistent, the story is taken up by structural and pacing decisions that just makes Godzilla competently mundane. Objectively, I guess. For me, it rises above that. The plot is serviceable as a vehicle to drive us to the scenes of pitting Godzilla against the Mutos. Despite that though, the scenes of Godzilla act as the film's trump card and overhauls it from a bore to an unquestionably satisfying confrontation between the gargantuan beasts, making the tiresome segments of the film worth sitting through. Either that or you'll just end up watching the Godzilla scenes on YouTube afterwards because you don't need much context to appreciate why the scenes are great.
Now on to King of Monsters. For the sequel, it would appear that the positives and negatives have intensified from Godzilla. However, when I say the positives and negatives have intensified, it isn't necessarily a good thing for the positive side either. In this sequel, they have responded to the criticism rather one-sided, meaning they focused far more on the action scenes, but they let the humanizing aspect of the story become blundered even more. They just ignored it. It comes across as quite belligerent because now we might have quantity over quality. Half of the time you can't really see what's going on in the monster fights. This is due part to the film's insistence to constantly have low angles so they can have the human characters in the frame as well, and so you can see them reacting to it. For me, this got irritating because when it comes to the monster fights, I want it to be just that. I don't want the characters to be in the frame. I couldn't care less about the humans' reactions to the mayhem. I only care about mine. And the impact of that is hindered when the action is disrupted by people running around in the frame. The human characters are even more paper-thin and cookie-cutter. I guess they try to give them motivations, but they lack the setup and convictions. The motivations of the mother scientist and the animal hunter father are meant to stem from the death of their son in 2014. The mother has convinced herself that if she releases these monsters and lets the collateral damage of them fighting wipe the vast majority of humans on the planet, then the world will be better for it because we are the true monsters, we are the parasite. Yeah, it's that plot line, but what? Does she want to coexist with the monsters with less humans on the planet? Why does she assume that the monsters won't just wipe out humanity completely? Why does she think they'll just stop? Because of the echo communicator device she has? This is all wishy-washy nonsense. She provides the characters with a slideshow, PowerPoint presentation, video essay kind of thing explaining herself. And this scene is just awkward because it intercuts the footage of the monsters like it's a YouTube video or something. This might be a nitpick, but this is the main issue with her character. She is an unlikable bitch. So she wants to rid the world of humans and separate parents from their child with death because that's what happened to her. No, if anything, she should want to purge the world of all the monsters out of existence, so the same thing that happened to her doesn't happen to other people. Not this absolute gibberish about, oh, we're the monsters, climate change. The father is more innocent, but his hatred and connection between him and Godzilla is poorly developed. On the other hand, his hatred for monsters itself at least makes sense. But what I'm saying is, it doesn't do enough to make you care. Maybe it would have been better if we actually saw the death of his son in its entirety. But we don't really. We just see the aftermath in 2014. We don't really see the emotional toll it had over the father and mother. The daughter character, she's just there. Millie Bobby Brown did a fine job for what the character was, but the character didn't really play much of a part in the sequence of events. The only time she does something is when she somehow hears the colonel and her mother's plans from the communication device through the comms speakers system in the facility. For some reason she can do that. So she casually goes to steal the inviolable device that isn't heavily guarded for some reason, and she goes to a stadium and sends out a signal to calm down all the monsters. Her ideology has confused me. She seems to be aware and on board with everything her mother was doing and what her end goal was. We don't know why she's on board besides her being her mother. I didn't really get that part. Charles Dance is wasted in an actor. I'm sorry, but you're not going to get your Tywin Lannister fix here. His talents are not utilised and his entire character is just used as a plot device for the mother to rally some nondescript British eco-terrorist militants. This character is just dropped and shoved to the side when the writers decided he's not needed anymore. Apparently he shows up in an after credit scene where he claims a decapitated head of King Ghidorah, but I didn't wait for that. Pretty much, as far as I can tell, everyone's saying that Ken Watanabe's character is the most interesting of all of them, which is true, but the bar's quite low. I still don't find him overly fascinating. His connection with Godzilla has been apparent since the first film, granted, as he's been studying Godzilla and anticipating his return. But his sacrifice to detonate a nuclear bomb to revive Godzilla with radiation was well executed, but I couldn't really have an emotional response to it because I wasn't really convinced that he couldn't have just set the timer on the nuke for long enough for him to get in, set it, and then go back to his aquatic vehicle and then back to the submarine. To answer for this, a character says if the heat doesn't kill you, the radiation will, but he seems completely fine given that he has a radiation suit. I mean, he even takes his helmet off. The heat doesn't melt his face off. His bodily functions are not impacted by the radiation. The film tells you one thing but shows you another. I did not buy for a second that he could not have just left the temple alive once he set the nuke on the timer. So his sacrifice just seemed extremely contrived to me. Like I said, I think it would have been far more interesting if Bryan Cranston remained as the main character. Then he sacrifices himself to save Godzilla, as Godzilla is the only thing that can ensure his wife's demise wasn't in vain, and he would have seen no better way to go out than to join his wife by going out with a bang and making physical contact with Godzilla himself and come to terms with him. I don't have a problem with the human characters being involved in a Godzilla film, inherently, providing that the characters are well written and their motivations and convictions are in context with the monsters and they make logical sense philosophically. I'm getting sick of these films breezing over the cliche of humans believing that humans are the parasite of the world, so they are willing to decimate their own species. It either results in an unlikable character whose motivations don't make sense because their drastic ideologies just aren't believable. In the case of the villain not being human, I understand it because they are detached from humans' livelihood and they are looking at an issue on a broad scale. They lack any empathy for humans. It doesn't influence their judgment. This can be said for Thanos in Infinity War. He's seen the problem for what it really is. That's why, whilst his nefarious actions are drastic in Infinity War, you can understand the grand scheme perspective he has. But when this character in King of Monsters just wants to eradicate the human race because she lost a loved one, it just comes across as idiotic. Also, the way they kill off Ken Watanabe's female assistant just represents how they know no one will give a shit.
Okay, so this is going to be a response to the people arguing that you should not criticize Godzilla because you shouldn't be expecting characters and plot. You should focus on the fight scenes, they're what matters. Listen, say what you will about the inclusion of human characters in a Godzilla film, but you understand that whatever you say about them, they still take up minutes of the runtime. They are still padding the time between the blissful fight scenes reminiscent of what you are telling us Godzilla is known for. Regardless of how big of a fan you are of Godzilla, would it not be important for the human aspect of the film to be well incorporated? When we scrutinise the film, we are not saying the human aspect of the film is something that must be prevalent, and because it's not well executed, it's a bad film. We are just saying it is in the film, whether any side of the argument likes it or not. We are saying it would have been beneficial for the film if they put effort in to develop the human characters and make us care, as well as put in the spectacle that is the fight scenes in Godzilla. I think that most people are okay with the idea of there being a human focus, as long as it's done well. Same goes for the complete opposite. If the entire film is going to be monsters fighting, then maybe personify Godzilla and the monsters. It is possible, not through dialogue, but through visual storytelling. But the harsh reality is that movies will always need star power so they can make money. So the absence of human characters in these films is very unlikely. The people saying you shouldn't worry about plot holes or logic really need to swallow their fandom and just look at what they see and really think about if it follows and makes sense. I just wanted to state that as I'm going into the plethora of contrivances and character decisions that don't make sense to me. Aside from what I've already covered, of course. This won't necessarily be in sequential order because I can't really remember the order of which this happens. So when King Ghidorah is born and rises, awakening from dormancy, why do the soldiers just stand and watch? They have the aircraft behind them waiting to take off, but they have to risk their lives to see the spectacle instead. This is what I'm talking about. Why is a film so obsessed with giving us the reactions to characters?
I could not care less about what soldier number 1, soldier number 2, soldier number 3 thinks about this sight. Just shows the emergence of the Titans in the best way possible. Why not have the soldiers immediately scurry away as they watch Ghidorah behind them breed catastrophe? But of course, the soldiers die because they're all imbeciles. As the father is facing imminent death, as him and the soldiers are stuck in this inept aircraft as at the mercy of Ghidorah, the mother is using the communicator to keep Ghidorah vicious. In effect, she's essentially willing to kill the father, making her ex-husband her late husband. This character is nothing but a dangerous combination of stupidity and insanity. Utterly naive to what she's doing until the plot wants her to wake up and become virtuous all of a sudden. When she was operating her device, the daughter should have just ripped it out of her hands and thrown it out of the helicopter in a fit of rage. That would have been good. How else would you react upon seeing your mother willingly causing the death of your father? The sudden introduction to the oxygen-destroying nukes, the anti-oxygen nukes, whatever they call them, it's so jarring and comes out of nowhere. I think I heard that this was a factor in the older Godzilla films or material, but that's irrelevant. So Godzilla and King Ghidorah are fighting, and then the military just, I don't know, FaceTimes our characters, and he's like, "Hi, so we've got this nuclear bomb that destroys oxygen or something, get to a safe distance, bye." They strike both of the monsters with the warhead. This does shit all to King Ghidorah and negates Godzilla a bit, so he has to flee to his resting place. Then loads of dead fish rise to the surface of the ocean because it would appear fish need oxygen in this universe. I don't know if I'm oversimplifying the science behind this, but maybe I wouldn't find it so mind-numbing if we were told a bit about how the oxygen nuke just works. Whatever. King of Monsters has this extreme tendency to cut characters, which is inherently fine, but they're doing it during the fight scenes. I can't comprehend why they would do this. The complaints for 2014 Godzilla was to do with this, hiding the action from us, so instead they do the same, but try to justify it more. Oh, so this character is running inside a house, let's follow her. No, I want to see the action. Now, when it really gets down to it, cuts to bullshit and just depicts the monster fights with a high angle, it's great. Honestly, the fight scenes in this film helps me not hate the film and allows me to enjoy it more. Albeit, it's still annoying when they have the constant low angles so we can see Godzilla's legs behind the human characters, but despite that, it's pretty good. The CGI and cinematography is outstanding, and some of the shots really resonated with me and stuck in my mind. I like the detail of being able to see Godzilla's breath in the Antarctica fight scene. I would pay good money to have a massive canvas or poster of some of the Godzilla shots in this film on my wall. From the moment we eerily see Godzilla for the first time in the submarine to the showdown between him and King Ghidorah, for me it made the film worth seeing in the end. That said, it is very dependent on exactly what and how much you do value in the monster fights. You really need to trudge through some boring expositional and sometimes patronising dialogue and character moments. For me, it still has the core problem of 2014 Godzilla, in that they both have some amazing visuals and spectacle, but it's all surrounded by things that will bore most people to tears. As a result, it's unlikely that I will watch Godzilla King of Monsters again, but I'll probably find myself rewatching the fight scenes on YouTube, enjoying it just on the same level because the context the film delivers isn't awfully engaging. Additionally, I found that as soon as Godzilla gained his radiation overhaul and repeatedly carried out nuclear blasts, it kind of took away the stakes for the rest of the film and Kong vs Godzilla. It was a bit like how in the end of Captain Marvel she just gets her powers. I mean, how is Kong meant to stand a chance in Kong vs Godzilla? I have no idea. Godzilla is incredibly overpowered by the end of this film. As of now, I've just realised I haven't spoken about the other Titans in the film. Queen Mothra looked quite incredible on the screen, but what made her tiresome is the exposition about her being Godzilla's companion. They explain it away in a way that isn't memorable at all, so I didn't really grasp what Mothra was all about in this film. And that's the key crux of the point. In the film, Rodan was serviceably there to raise the stakes. I enjoyed the chase sequence between him and the huge military fighter jet Agro, I think it's called. But I didn't really grasp why I should care about these monsters. Ultimately here, Godzilla King of the Monsters amplifies what worked in 2014's Godzilla, but it's brought down by poorly developed characters taking the vast majority of the film up. The Titan-on-Titan action is a crowd pleaser when the film actually gets to it, but ultimately this film boils down to an incredibly well-made production that is invalidated by the awkwardly put together story and plot. Much like something else we were bestowed with recently, you know. Anyway, thank you for watching. Be sure to comment if you disagree with me. See you next time.